from the arterial, we have branching to these smaller vessels called capillaries. But there is a particular structure called an arteriovenous anastomosis. And I want to just describe what this is. Arteriovenous describes a connection between an artery and a vein. And anastomosis is the joining of. So this is a joining of an artery and a vein. So arteries carry blood away from the heart, right? From the heart. Arteries are going to carry blood away from the heart. Veins will carry blood back to our heart. And in between, there's some way to connect them. And that's the anastomosis. The anastomosis can be either made of the arteriole or capillary bed. Okay? So either the smallest arterial blood vessel, the arteriole, can directly connect to a vein, or the arterioles can branch into smaller capillaries, forming a capillary bed, and that can then go back to a vein. So there's two ways to do it. I'll show you an image. What an anastomosis is not only is it a joining, but the joining of blood vessels has a specific purpose. It acts as a shunt, usually to bypass a capillary bed. That's essentially what an anastomosis will do. And here we can find some anastomoses very commonly in the skin. We can find them in the gastrointestinal tract surrounding particularly our small intestine. Also in our lungs. Find the arteriovenous anastomosis. Okay. And let's have a look at it. All right. Now what we're looking at here is our muscular arteries have branched into smaller arterioles, and this is what we see here. This is an arteriole. In fact, this is quite a large arteriole, and you can see that it's branching into smaller vessels, which we've named meta-arterioles. These are just small arterioles, okay? And then what happens is those arterioles branch into even small vessels called capillaries, okay? These are what we call arterial capillaries because the blood is still flowing away from the heart and still highly oxygenated. These capillaries go deep inside the tissue. They're found in between layers of cells in the tissues. They're so small, they're only the width of one red blood cell. That's how small they are. And what we find is that deep in the tissues, blood releases its oxygen, releases its nutrients, it diffuses, osmosis, and is actively transported into the tissue. Waste product, carbon dioxide, leaves the tissues and is transported into the capillaries, and then what happens is the blood doesn't return to the heart. And we still are in the same capillary, but now, since the capillary is containing mostly deoxygenated blood and is returning to the heart, we call it a venous capillary. So we actually have, our capillaries can be dedicated arterial or venous capillaries. Okay. And another thing that we'll see here is that all of these capillaries that have branched off that arterial form a capillary bed. And this is what you find deep in the tissue. A network of capillaries in the lungs or the digestive tract. Now, remember our arterioles had the three layers. They had the tunica adventitia on the outside, tunica media, and tunica intima. And what happens is as we branch from our arterioles into our capillaries, the smooth muscle cells of the tunica media are lost. They actually no longer are in the vessel wall. In fact, what happens is at the beginning of the capillary bed, we actually have what we call sphincter, pre-sphincter, or pre-capillary sphincter muscles. And these are actually smooth muscle fibers that used to be in the wall of the arteriole. Now they're found on the outside of the vessel, of the beginning of the capillary bed. Now these sphincter muscles are important because they will actually control blood. Remember, our muscular arteries control blood pressure, and our arterial control blood flow. These sphincters that you see here used to be in the tunica media of the arteriole, but when that arteriole branches into capillaries, it loses its tunica media, and the smooth muscle actually is on the outside of the capillary, beginning of the capillary bed. And these can actually constrict and stop blood from flowing into the capillary bed. If I tighten these sphincter muscles, look what happens. Look what happens. Look at that. The sphincter muscles have tightened. Here is our arteriole, okay? The capillaries are branching off of it into a capillary bed. The sphincters, or precapillary sphincters, have tightened and prevented or reduced blood flow to the capillary bed. And now, instead, blood will just continue through the arteriole into a venous blood vessel on its way back. So we bypassed, we shunted blood away from the capillary bed, and that is an arteriovenous anastomosis. That's what this is, okay? And what it's done is it's done its function. It's bypassed blood flow through the capillary bed. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, two reasons, okay? Maybe you start to exercise and you need extra blood flowing to your muscles. So what will happen is blood will be shunted away from your digestive tract and it will go to your muscles. To shunt it away from the digestive tract, this is what goes on in the blood vessels going to your digestive tract. Instead of picking up nutrients from the small intestine, precapillary sphincters are closed, we have an anastomosis and blood bypasses the digestive tract. Sometimes people have lung infections like pneumonia. When the lung is infected, the portions of infected tissue don't do their job. They don't pick up oxygen from the air that you're breathing in, and they don't release carbon dioxide because they're usually filled with pus and fluid and so forth. And what happens is your body forms these anastomoses and bypasses the portion of the lung that is infected. If it's not doing its job, why give it a blood supply? That's how your body thinks. So these type of anastomoses occur also in the lungs when the lung tissue is damaged. Okay, so let's look at the very, very smallest vessel, the capillary. We've seen our arteriole, they will branch